Hi people. Before I get into the main video, I want to say Slava Ukraini. Today is Ukraine's Independence Day, and of course, it's more poignant than ever. This is a country fighting for its very survival. I've never equivocated what I feel about this war and Russia's brutal invasion, and Russia's lies around the invasion, and Russia's lies around their atrocities. But I think it is so very important that this country prevails. Um, Alexander Usyk in his world title fight with Joshua personified that courage of Ukrainians. I don't want to sound trite or anything. I really do think that there is the Ukrainian people generally have shown incredible resilience under the circumstances. And I just hope to God that Ukraine prevails. Because if it doesn't, then the forces of darkness will sweep further. And I don't even think that's an exaggeration. I believe what Russia is doing is evil. Um, I think it is somewhat comparable to the 1930s and what the Third Reich was doing. So I just hope Ukraine prevails. Um, so technology, the future, these are huge questions, and they they're very interesting. They provide a lot of talking points and a lot of angles to look at. I'm going to try to make this fairly condensed, but it might be a longer video. Incidentally, if I don't usually do this because by nature my live streams are quite spontaneous because I can't find a time that would fit everyone. But if you are interested, I'm going to do a live stream today, let's say at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. It's now 20 past 2. I know that's not much notice. But if you happen to see this video, tune in at 3 o'clock today, 24th of August. And I'll be doing a live stream and we'll see how that goes. And if you miss that, don't worry about it. I will be doing live streams more often because I like them. I like engaging with my subscribers. Um, so the idea for this one came about from a forum, a discussion forum on another group. It's not a group about science or technology. It was just something the admin posts. He sometimes puts out random topics for people to discuss, and I think it's a good one. I'll say from the outset, I do feel there can be an inherent problem from overt reliance on technology, and I do not want to see a world where, in fact, we're already seeing this on some level with social media and other forms of technology, where people are overly reliant on it. Now, what I mean by that is, if you look at, I call it the party analogy or the party um, outlook. If you consider a house party, right, just a standard house party, obviously pre and post pandemic, where you just get a group of friends to gather around for a birthday party or something. I had a good one here for my 26th birthday a decade ago. Just a house party. There's drinks, there's food, people mingle and talk. That's what an ideal house party should be. But increasingly in the 21st century, you go to a house party, there's a reasonable chance, especially if it's the millennial generation, that half the guests will be on their phones. So the whole concept of just interacting with friends is lost. And I'm not playing holier than thou here. I'm guilty of it. Not on my phone, but on this laptop. For example, my friend will come round and we watch a film and I'll be multitasking as we're watching the film. I'm Googling stuff. And we don't talk as much as we should, really. Um, and then that's something I'm going to try and amend. But that's something I wouldn't like to see where we get so reliant on technology that we're forgetting basic humanity. And I always say, people should do a little test. Go for a walk somewhere. It could be to a local park, it could be around the block, somewhere. But go take your keys, obviously, but don't bring your phone. There's no need for it. If it's a short walk and you've nowhere else to be and you don't have any other plans, leave your phone. Just go for the walk. Fresh air, no technology, just you and your thoughts in in the I was going to say great outdoors, but at least in the outdoors. And there's no distraction. There's no technology. There's no what's it called? That little device that people use for timing the running, and none of that. Just take it all away, go back to basics, just you walking or jogging, whatever you prefer. I think that's very healthy. And I think that's the sort of thing we need to keep in balance. But I'm not a Luddite in the sense, if you're an international viewer, by the way, and you don't know what that expression refers to, in the 1830s, particularly around that time, but throughout the Industrial Revolution in this country, there was a backlash. Um, the fear was, well, it was multifaceted. Some of it was religious. When the London Underground was first built, and this is at the higher end of the Industrial Revolution, when it was winding down into the new era, um, in 1863, people were actually warning that it would open up the earth to hell because it was going underground. It was very controversial when it was first opened. Brunel's Railways, the Great Western Railway, it cut through, controversially, I should say, through some villages in Berkshire and Oxfordshire. Um, so that was controversial. Thomas Hardy's novels were all about nostalgia for the old ancient country life in southwest England. So when the Industrial Revolution happened, there was this backlash. There was the Swing riots and the Rebecca riots. Anyway, the word Luddite comes from one of the leaders, the sort of Ned Ludd. He was That was kind of acronym. I don't think it was his real name, but hence Luddite. So that's why technophobes today are sometimes called Luddites. But it's now hard to imagine this country without the Industrial Revolution. Although it created great toil, and there was the infamous Victorian factory conditions, long, hard work with very little reward. This was featured in both the London 2012 Olympics and this year at the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. There was little segments on this country was built really. People will say it was built on slavery. Maybe that's partly true, but it was also built on the blood, sweat, and toil of British people. That's the reality. They were toiling long and hard in factories, and coal mines and shipyards. And I think today we sort of take it for granted. I mean, there are people who do long menial jobs as well today, but the whole labour market has changed. So most people are not in that sort of line of work. Um, Liz Truss apparently made some controversial comments a while back. It's now re-emerged in which she was calling British workers lazy. I don't agree with that. I mean, the notion is foreign workers are more productive and the work ethic's better. Well, that's forgetting the nature that this country was built on, which was the Industrial Revolution, British ingenuity, British hard work. But a lot of it, frankly, was exploitative and appalling. Uh, it's difficult to get our mindset when we're surrounded by social media and many comforts. Difficult to imagine a life where you're going down a coal mine all day or you're toiling in a linen factory. That was life. Certainly no white privilege there. Which is another reason that term infuriates me because I think it's so misplaced and inflammatory. But anyway, I digress. I'm just making the point that whenever you have a radical change in technology, there is backlash. So, looking at the future, if robot technology really replaced a lot of human labor, there would be controversies. The obvious question is, well, what happens to those people's jobs? Where do they get their income? So that would be the major thing that has to be addressed. Um, but I'm not totally against the idea. I can definitely see merit in looking at, for example, utilizing robot technology to do dangerous work which could save human lives. It could reduce the number of workplace accidents and injuries, um, which still is a big problem. In this country, it's improved a lot, but in many parts of the world, there's industries that remain extremely dangerous. And of course, the very notion of robot technology, of course, it's going to be the developed world that benefits from it. Japan, the United States, the UK, France. Um, the average citizen of Mali or Malawi or Afghanistan isn't going to see the upside of this. Certainly not anytime soon. So there's always going to be that discrepancy, or there's always going to be that question mark of bridging the world's divide as well. It's a bit like um, the cure for cancer. Well, that's going to come first in developed countries. Um, Same with HIV. Apparently, there was a clinical trial recently, or not a clinical trial actually. It was a third successful case of a man being fully cured of HIV, fully, not just living with it, cured of it. Apparently, it's only the third such case, but that's wonderful. But it shows it's again that's something that only Americans and Britons and people living in developed countries will experience, notwithstanding America's very controversial healthcare system where it's the poor are really not benefiting. But again, someone living in South Africa with AIDS or Zambia isn't going to see the benefits from that. So that's a major issue. But it makes sense if you have an industry which has a lot of accidents, or even look at the armed forces bomb disposal. I think it makes total sense, and this is already being used on some level, where you get a robot to defuse a bomb. Um, Now, if it goes wrong, the robot gets damaged or destroyed, but that could potentially save lives. Um, there's a lot of areas of this. It's very possible that in the future warfare will be through technology, but I'm not sure if that necessarily means no loss of life, because if you have a major cyber attack, that could take out, for example, generators in a hospital, potentially. Um, so it doesn't necessarily mean lower mortality. I mean, we still very much see conventional war today. It's raging in Ukraine, it's raging in Tigray, and in other parts of the world. But we're also seeing this kind of crossover of also technology. I mean, Russia's utilize propaganda, online propaganda on an industrial scale. And then, of course, cyber warfare. We're seeing this increasingly with Russia, China. Probably the West has done it as well. So it's increasingly being utilized. Um, so there is a dark side to how technology can be used. And on a very basic premise, I spoke about how you go to a party and half the people are on the smartphones. Well, there's another thing, if you complain to a company, it could be anything, and you try to complain online, there's a very strong chance you'll get an automated message. I've been there several times, and it's infuriating because no matter what algorithms are set, they could have say 10 set answers. Is the answer you're looking for here? And that's all very well. It might say, oh, the page is down or the product isn't working, but it doesn't get into the nuances of your specific problem because two people may have a problem, but the precise details may be different. And unless you're speaking to a human being, you can't you can't express that. So it leaves you in a situation where you try and get help and you're going in circles. Um, so I always, I must admit, I don't have much patience with that. And I will say, when I get that little automated message, I don't know if it's a person or not. No, I'll say, "Are you a human being?" And then sometimes I've actually been passed on to an actual operator. And it's not that, you could get inefficient people who are not particularly helpful either, but at least with a person, you have an avenue of communication that you wouldn't have with technology. There's also a risk, I've heard of technology being used in surgeries and things like this. That's great, but what happens if it breaks down? What happens if you have, for example, trains entirely powered by computers, so driverless cars? It sounds good on paper, but my big question is technology can never be 100% reliable. So if that suddenly breaks down, not only can it cause practical problems, it could actually be very dangerous. That would be one of my major concerns if we're overly reliant on this stuff. And the inventors and the companies that would be pushing this would be saying, oh, it's foolproof, it's 100% safe. And maybe it does have a very good safety record. But I think 100% is dangerous speculation. 99% maybe. But there will always be a possibility of something breaking down. Now, I suppose the counter argument is you could always have human error. We've seen accidents. A famous one in this country was the Paddington train crash of 1999, major incident. I believe 32 people killed. Now that was ruled to be human error because the train driver, there'd been sunlight in his eyes, he'd misjudged the number of signals. It was deemed to be human error, and there's many other examples of that with railway accidents and also with aviation accidents. Not always. Sometimes pilots and drivers have been scapegoated when it actually might be a technology problem. Um, so that would be my concern if we're overly reliant on this stuff. Machines break down, it happens. Even the top machines, there's always a possibility of that happening. And if it does, then what? There has to be, I think, a backup plan there if that was to happen, because lives could be put at risk. But this isn't just something futuristic, it's already happening. Japan and South Korea, of course, are the great showcase countries for this. But we're seeing it across the world now, well, in developed countries, in France, in the UK, in the United States. I'm not I'm not so cynical. I think it could be a good thing, but it's very important that this balance is got right. Um, I also want to talk briefly about the subject of roboethics. I mean, this was brought up with the series Humans on Channel 4, starring Gemma Chan, 2015 to 2018. It was a good series, I thought, but basically, if you haven't seen it, the premise is in the near future Britain, ostensibly the 20s or the 30s, um, people will be using robot technology. But this is in the form of androids that are incredibly human-like. They basically look like humans. They don't look like robots, and they can be turned on and charged, and they do housework. Well, of course, some people enjoy doing housework. They get satisfaction from cleaning the dishes or whatever. But anyway, in the series, it showed that there's kind of a human backlash to this, where people were protesting at this sort of technology. It also got into ethical territory with some of the simps started developing a conscience. Now, I don't quite buy this because in order for a robot, an android, in order for there to be ethical questions there, which this series very much tapped into, there was also a Japanese film made called Air Doll, where it got into this lonely middle-aged man bought this doll of a attractive young woman, and of course he used it. Right? Some would say it's creepy, but if you are desperate and alone, people will do anything for that basic. I was going to say that basic human contact. Of course, it isn't human. Anyway, in the film, she comes alive during the day, and it gets into all these questions about roboethics. But I think one thing we really need to address in human society is loneliness. And it isn't just about sex, it's just about human company. Um, I do fear that we're living in an increasingly polarized world where so much is online and people are we're losing something. And I'm saying this as someone who, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I use social media a lot. It has lots of benefits. I don't think it's an entirely bad thing. And I think issues like bullying and people being unpleasant, that existed before social media. So I wouldn't blame social media and scapegoat social media for all of society's problems. I think that's a mistake. But we just have to be a little bit wary. Um, and lost my trail of thought there, but that's really it. We just need to be wary that our humanity is not replaced, and we still have this. I do so much on this laptop. I need to read a book. I need to, and I do. I read a lot, but it's so important that we don't get derailed, that we don't allow technology to take over completely, whilst at the same time utilizing the best aspects of it. Ultimately, like so much, it comes down to a great balancing act. I'm not against developing technology for usage of. I definitely think there could be a place in terms of dangerous jobs or maybe really tedious menial jobs. But the big caveat there is, well, what income do those people get instead? Um, I think at the very least these things should be looked at, especially as we get more and more into the 21st century. As we approach the end of this century, if there aren't significant changes to human society in a positive way, that would be very sad. Of course, as we get more into the future, it may not resemble Back to the Future. It may not resemble all those dystopian films or futuristic films that we've seen. They're all human ideas. But who knows? It could be very interesting. It could be very exciting. But I do not want to live in a world where it's like being in this giant kind of dashboard. We have to have basic reality. We have to have basic human communication, nature, these sort of things must be protected as well. That's very important. Okay, let me know your thoughts.